Let's jump into topic number one. The first topic we want to discuss, unsurprisingly, WWDC 2024. It just happened yesterday. I don't know about you guys, but I clear my calendar and watch it like it's Christmas morning. No spoilers. I don't want to know what happened. I need to watch it live. They went through an entire rigmarole and exercise of a bunch of announcements for all the next-gen OSs and kept us waiting with bated breath for their AI announcements, Apple Intelligence announcements, not artificial intelligence. All very exciting. What stood out to you guys? Let's go around the horn and talk about what jumped out at each of us, what we think the implications were, and what happens next.
First of all, I think that this release was an incredible release across all of their product ranges. The amount of updates that they've done was pretty impressive. In some ways, it also kind of felt like it was a release of a whole lot of product dev roadmap items that have been sitting in the backlog for years, really basic things like being able to change the design of your home screen on iOS, or gesture UI with Apple AirPods, or even just some improvements on Siri. And finally, one thing that I was actually really, really excited about is that they're finally innovating iMessage, something that I feel like they have been not doing for years and I've been waiting for, that you can snooze messages or send later, schedule send, some basic and really easy things that actually, is an app that we all interact with. Probably one of the most common interacted apps on our phones for iPhone users. But of course, most notably for me was that they spent the first half of it not saying anything about AI. And that, to me, that notable omission was very, very clear. Even for items that actually had AI enabled, some of the image generation and editing things that they've included in the Photos update. But when they finally got to it, of course, this is Apple, and so they don't miss a moment for a brand activation. And interestingly, I actually read somewhere that Apple has actually never said artificial intelligence on stage. They always said things like neural nets or generative, but they never said AI. And of course, they rebranded it. And I love a great brand moment. So I love the Apple Intelligence take that they had. And of course, a bucket of new diffusion models, generative models, and large language models built by Apple and only brought to supported devices. So I think that's something we can kind of talk about, which is sort of interesting. Also, some of the risks of being smaller models on devices versus the integration with OpenAI, which is also the thing that I'm the most excited about, obviously. And I'm sure we'll get into that.
For me, I had like a highlight, low light. My highlight was the integration with Siri. I think Siri is the bot that I used the most. It's like the interface, the vocal interface, the human-like interface that I use on the car, on the go, using my phone. I love the fact that now it's much more powerful, or will be more powerful. I'd love to see how it actually works. And being empowered by OpenAI, very exciting. So having a startup empowering all the interactions that we're going to have, that's super amazing. And I think we discussed this in one of the past episodes. It's going to make OpenAI even more powerful in our life than it is today. So that's very exciting. But then came the calculator for iPad. Come on, guys. Okay. So you have a calculator app for iPad, or the other one that I'm like as a person who used to work in Android. Now you can move your icons where you want on the screen. Oh, thank you. That's so nice of you, the gods of Apple. So I would say that like I love the innovation that they showed on the artificial intelligence side, not the Apple intelligence side, the artificial intelligence side. But from the other side, their other innovations are like, if you're an Android user, it's like, welcome to the century.
I think Apple Intelligence is what it needed to be. Like, everybody's been talking about how shit Siri is for years. And then since ChatGPT came out, people are like, when is Apple going to finally fix Siri? I think what's cool about what they've done with it, which again is not particularly creative or surprising, but if they make it work well, is going to be really nice, is that it pulls all of your personal sources of data on device so that you can actually ask it to do smart things. I think they spent quite a lot of their time demoing that sort of thing, like add this photo to the email I drafted to Mada and Josh, like I pulled that straight off their presentation, things like that. So, add a new page to this doc. So they actually use the word this quite a few times in the example. So it's like that contextual aspect, which I think AI on its own doesn't have, but if you can integrate it on device, that again plays to Apple's strengths. So if it works well, that will be cool. I'll reserve judgment. Normally with Apple, you can count on it working well, but of course, Siri hasn't worked well for a long time. So that will be interesting. Other stuff, yeah, the iPad calculator, that is just pure like presentation bait. Like, wow, that's really cool. No one's going to use it, whatever. By the way, what this showed is that, you can sort of hand write a maths problem. It'll solve it for you. Okay, cool. Other things I noticed, updates to Vision OS. I just thought that was interesting because Apple Vision Pro so far has been a bit of a dud. We discussed it when it came out. I think this is one of those version 1 things. They'll keep iterating, and I thought it was nice to see that already just 6 months later, we've got the second version of the OS, and our prediction from earlier on that Apple will just quietly keep iterating. They're not giving up on this thing, I think is really interesting. It's also available in more countries. So again, they are just sticking to their plan, I think, with the Apple Vision Pro. And then one final thing I noted, and I think this is probably, Amir, I'd love to get your thoughts on this because I think it's probably most important for folks in the US where, the banking system is particularly dysfunctional. The addition of functionality to Apple Wallet. They've got this very cool tap to pay peer-to-peer thing, which is like, if I want to send you $20, we just tap our iPhones and this beautiful animation to show $20 being slipped from one iPhone to another. Might be starting to eat into Venmo and stuff like that. But I just thought it was really interesting to see Apple double down on effectively providing these retail banking services.
I can definitely see this as something that I use on an ongoing basis with service provider. I can tell you that like Apple Pay, I would say 90% of my interactions are with Apple Pay, and this will make it a 95%. And I think you hit an interesting point of like Siri connecting to other apps is also super important because it opens up an ecosystem where I can tell Siri to take actions in third-party apps. You hit the nail there where actually it opens up another ecosystem, a vocal ecosystem for the entire third-party apps on that phone.
And it's a really interesting contrast to how Google's done it, where, I've just gone back from iOS to Android. Like to your point, Amir, a lot of this stuff is like welcome to 10 years ago. But their Gemini integration, it really showcases the difference between how Apple and how Google do things, because the Gemini integration is really cool. And of course, Google built the tech themselves, unlike Apple, who are using OpenAI. And although Google has actually more access to data, they kind of neglected to integrate it in their V1. So Apple wouldn't have released the Gemini assistant in its state. Now, I hope and assume that Google are going to be working on it, but for the time being, it's kind of DOA because it's in its own AI silo and it doesn't connect to my personal life.
I don't know that they're leveraging OpenAI underneath. My understanding is, on a couple episodes ago, we talked about Apple's proprietary model, on-device model. And it seems to me that they have built what I would imagine to be a fairly limited, fairly small model that runs on device to do client-side app interactions with natural language. And then it reaches out to the cloud to do heavier duty stuff. And then only with permission does it reach out to ChatGPT to do things.
I think one of the really interesting things is that I knew we would talk about how basic it is to be able to change your home screen and those changes, but it's a massive, massive departure for Apple. They've always taken a design-first approach where they believe that their perspective on design should be adopted by their users. And that's been a huge philosophy that's driven a lot of the innovation and approach that Apple's had until today. And to be able to hand over the reins to everyday people to design their own home screens is a really big philosophical departure. And we've seen, I think there was two big philosophical departures that we saw. There was that one, which seems really innocuous, but is actually really interesting from a brand and business perspective. And then, of course, there's the other one, which is the privacy, which the reason Siri has been so lame so far is because they've taken a really strong perspective on privacy and they haven't wanted Siri to be able to go into apps so far. And I think that one of the things they really did focus on is, Chris, you were just saying that actually everything that's happening is on device intentionally and initially from Apple built models. But if there are things that are too complex or outside of the area of expertise of these Apple models on device, it can go one of two ways, which is my understanding. It'll go to a larger server based on Apple Silicon servers using what they're calling private cloud compute, and it'll be slower than something that's being done on the phone. But they're very clear to say that the information is never stored or sent to Apple. And then when you specifically ask for something that ChatGPT would be really good at, it will actually ask you, hey, is it cool if I ask ChatGPT for an answer to this question? And you have to accept that and share your information every time. And that will be taken into OpenAI's model. Now, obviously, that's a huge friction point. But again, just this adoption, this partnership with OpenAI is a departure from their really hard line focus on privacy that they've had so far. But they're not departing from that privacy focus, which I think was one of the questions I had when we knew that we would see this partnership between Apple and OpenAI is, how is Apple going to handle this, especially OpenAI, this company that's had a lot of drama and issues around safety and privacy, and Apple's so committed to that. That's part of their brand. That's part of their mission. they've come out really strong with these statements. At no point is OpenAI allowed to store any of these requests. Apple has said that they obscure your IP address, so OpenAI can't even connect multiple requests to form a profile of you. And the experience needs to be honed to reduce friction, but they're obviously still very committed to that privacy.
So let's geek out a little bit about that. If they don't have context, it's not very useful.
That's right.
And if they don't have a lot of information, it's not super useful. So I think the user experience will slowly drive them to give more information, to give more context, to give more permit. And also, if I need to say yes every time I connect, that's going to drive me nuts. That will drive user behavior.
I really think this whole security posture of Apple, on one hand, serves them very well and is a cudgel in some cases that they can beat Google and others over the head with. But I actually think it may backfire, giving them less room to maneuver in terms of gathering context, gathering compute capacity in the cloud, and building a great user experience. It really may backfire. I think it's overwrought, and I think it's overcomplicated. And the fact they spent so long trying to explain and justify their cloud security model, users are willing to trade privacy for utility all day long. And that may become more and more of a sensitive topic, or it may become more of a legal concern. I don't see it. I think Google has the right social contract with users over the long term. And this whole thing of like asking to reach out to ChatGPT is akin to the old Alexa skills model, which was not a successful model. And I think it limited them from being able to build personality and frictionless into Siri in this version. And I agree with you, Amir, that that's going to shift over time. But I don't want to be all negative here because there's a lot to be positive about. When I was watching it, I'm like, come on, get to the AI part. It's just like, it just went on and on for hours of like, I don't care about this, I don't care about this, I don't care about this, get to the AI. And they just did not want to mention AI, even when it was clearly something you could call AI. It's like they were deliberately avoiding the term, and it was conspicuous. I think the framing, when they finally got to it, of, hey, everyone else has world intelligence, we have personal intelligence. Apple Intelligence is about personal intelligence, and we have all of this access to the stuff on the device. I think that was very clever framing, right? And that's something that, as we've talked about on this show many times, try as they might, Microsoft doesn't really have access to your personal life. And OpenAI certainly doesn't. Google does, and Apple does. And the other thing I thought was, obviously very powerful is they're leveraging their unfair advantage. Siri and Siri's app intents, summarizing the notifications they're already getting from apps, all of their ability to index the apps for search. This is stuff that if they had not done it, would be almost malpractice. And then just one last point quickly. I think this show, one of our unfair advantages is start talking about the people behind the news. We keep talking about Apple and Google and Facebook, but there are human beings behind this news. And I think it's worth digging into who they are and how they think. And in this case, it just so happens that, as far as I understand, the head of Apple Intelligence is a mutual friend and acquaintance of ours, Amir, Josh Ellman.
An awesome guy.
He's an awesome guy. He's very thoughtful. He has a real strong ethic of pay it forward and helping and mentoring people who ask him for help. He's been at all the right companies at all the right inflection points, and he's chosen to be at Apple today, right at this moment.
A great product person as well.
He's a great product person. He's behind LinkedIn and Facebook platform and Twitter. And I just have a great deal of affection and faith in Josh Ellman. And I know whatever shortcomings they have now, limitations, he's going to help navigate that through. And I look forward to seeing kind of the levers he pulls over time there. It's going to be very exciting.
100%. And I think I totally agree with you. And just to close the loop, if I could connect all these dots with Siri and say, hey, Siri, take me to my next appointment in my Google Calendar, so that it will connect my Google Calendar with my maps, with my car, that will be an amazing experience. Just having this voice interface into all these interactions and connecting the dots, I'll press, I agree to do whatever, take all my data and sell it in China so that I can get to my next meeting faster. So I think that the user experience will drive it forward, and I'm super excited about what's coming up next.
I tend to agree. We talked about this on the last time we discussed what we thought was going to be this announcement. I think my perspective on it is that they've been reticent to get to this point, but I think this partnership with OpenAI is really going to allow them to combine Apple's excellence in hardware with OpenAI's excellence. And to your point, Chris, Apple's unfair advantage also in their hardware ownership, and the fact that now really, I think we're going to see an inflection point where there's a lot of categories where Apple actually hasn't been able to build real valuable hardware. I know we've talked about things like home automation in the past, and they haven't really cracked it. And I think it was because Siri wasn't working. I think it was because they had privacy concerns and they weren't really willing yet to kind of take that leap forward. And To me, I'm really excited because I actually think there's a lot of areas for them to continue building out hardware products in our lives that will add to our entire ecosystem. And something I've said in the past is that we're all sitting, anyone who's been in the Apple ecosystem for 20 plus years is sitting on troves of data for your own personalized GPTs. And so I couldn't agree more with this idea that combining OpenAI's intelligence, obviously, with your own personal data to create truly valuable experiences across their devices is going to be a game changer and very difficult to compete with.
If they let OpenAI soar, right, if they let them actually play a first-class role on the platforms, they've basically said, oh, yeah, whatever, if you want to reach out to OpenAI, we'll let you, but don't worry, we're going to plug in all the other models and it doesn't really matter. Like, no, I want Siri to have a personality. I want it to have context. I want it to be creative. I want it to be my one-stop Samantha, whatever. And that's not going to happen if Apple keeps saying, we're like paranoid, concerned about our private security cloud thing. It's just like, let me tick the box. Let me grant you permission. Let me trade my privacy for utility. I will do it all day long. Let's go. Come on. Let's do this.
I will even not use my calculator on my tablet if you let me do that. I promise.
Exactly. I will give up my iPad calculator for it.
There's actually also a massive risk to Apple in the perspective that they've taken of working on these smaller systems. You know, these smaller models, these owned Apple models, they're prone to more hallucinations, lower quality, and leading to a worse experience design and reduced trust, especially in this really critical time where people are just building their understanding of interacting with AI models and building their decisions of whether or not they trust these models to give them the information that they need. We've obviously seen massive Google flubs with that. And I think these smaller systems on device, they have hardware limitation, and also these models can grow and change so fast. It's a question of how are they going to be able to keep up on the physical hardware. So it's a really important thing you've brought up, and they'll either be forced to adopt it to really integrate in a real way, or there will be a reduced experience design for people, and that will have its effect.
What I was actually thinking about, Ellie, is the concept of reliability, which is not something that just affects Apple. But if you think about, why did Siri suck so much? It was a lot to do with the fact that often you asked it to do something and it didn't. And the kind of payoff threshold where it's actually worth using a tool like this is when it gets it right, say 95% plus of the time. It's the same with like voice typing. Like I only started using voice typing when I didn't have to keep like correcting getting words wrong. So while it's all very cool to show off these capabilities, if they only get it right 80% of the time, 50% of the time, you're not going to use it. And again, I'm looking just at this screenshot from WWDC where they're showing all the little things you can tell Siri, right? Like, bring up the article about cicadas from my reading list, or add a new page to this doc. If it does it right most of the time, but not nearly all of the time, it remains a cute gimmick and you will not use it. I guarantee you will not use it. So I think the question for Siri and the question for Google and all the rest is, as much as what are the capabilities, is can you do them reliably? And Ellie, I think your point about on-device models is important. So that's Apple's weakness. Google's weakness, I think, in this case is not thinking carefully about experience design. But I think they're probably in terms of the technology and also the access to data. Let me just stash one more point in here, which is Apple doesn't have actually access to as much of people's personal lives as Google usually. They have a lot of location and stuff. But when you think, Amir, you mentioned, connect to my Google Calendar. Where's your email? It's in Gmail. It's sitting in the cloud. It's not sitting on device in your Apple Mail app. So I think there's a little weakness there as well, which is if you're only dealing with on-device data, a fairly big part of a lot of people's personal lives is stored in other companies' services in the cloud.
If you want to be extremely harsh, you could claim that the announcement is, congratulations, Apple now has Siri that actually works. It's kind of like they made Siri, the original Siri promise, work the way it should have been working for the most part of the last few years. And it feels like they failed. It feels like, we haven't tried this thing yet, but it feels like in their attempt to maintain privacy and avoid these large models in the cloud, that they haven't used the state of the art in terms of personality, creativity, conversation, interruptibility, and so on. And so it just feels like Siri has always been. It's always been half a step or a number of steps behind. And now it's like they added home screen icon rearranging. It's out of date. It's welcome to a couple of years ago. I think that's the harshest criticism we could give it right now. But we should hold our criticism and hold our verdict until we try the thing. But it was the permission to ask ChatGPT thing that I think was the most revealing. If you look at my tweet stream, it's like, cool, gimme. Oh my God, yuck. And it's like, no, that's broken. And they need to revisit that.
It's a little bit like the paste request that you have in Google when you cut your address and then you paste it into Google, and then it's like, do you want to paste? If I didn't want to paste, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So like, let me paste without asking me permission. So I totally agree. All these AIs are going to be so much powerful when they're interconnected. I think the word that you said, Chris, that is really important here is interoperability. And when all these systems are connected together, that's when it's going to be very, very useful to us all.
But it's antithetical to Apple's world, right? And this whole, like, are you sure you want to paste thing is flirting with being extremely paternalistic. And it's this, Apple is an extremely liberal, and I would say almost woke in some of the more pejorative sense company. There's a line here that we're flirting with of like, get out of my way, give me advanced mode, give me some trust here, give me some utility here. And again, this is not black and white. It's a spectrum. It's a line that moves. Different people will have it in different places. But Amir, you and I have talked endlessly about APIs and open standards and open platforms, walled gardens. As we've just both said, the future belongs to context and data and connectivity and interoperability. I'm sure if we had an Apple representative on the call, they would say, yes, but all those companies are going to mine your life and monetize your life, and you will be kind of a cog in the giant cloud intelligence, and we're going to protect you from that. Maybe I want to be embraced by my new AI overlords. Let's
But also,
do this.
will that clicking OK save that, right? So I think that's another thing. Like, it won't save it because I'm going to click OK anytime, all the time. I'm going to complain. Why are they asking me to click OK?
It's GDPR, cookie accept,
Exactly.
right? Like,
exactly.
shut up. This is not helpful.
You're right.
It's funny though, Chris, you said like Apple being a very liberal, like I agree with that, but I also actually think that Apple's been an incredibly paternalistic brand and design company for many, many years. I think that that's been a huge part of their success is that they took this perspective, which was, we know what's best for design. We're going to, whether or not you like it, we believe that we have a perspective on design, on our products, on our experiences. We will serve it to you, and either you will accept it or you will not. The reality is that people have accepted quite a paternalistic approach from this brand for a very long time.
You're right, Elli, 100%. And as a product manager, I'm always encouraging and reminding founders, like, you don't have to accept the complexity in the world. You should have strong opinions, best practices, polished experiences, and great defaults in the Apple style. But what Amir and I are saying is it's reaching its limits in terms of how far that goes. And it's reaching its limits in terms of this moment where context and cloud-based massive models are the advantage versus the privacy model.
Absolutely. And I think that if they're smart, we'll see how they react and how they take steps forward from here. I will reserve my judgment. I hope it works. I completely agree about the friction. I think that it's something that I looked at and was, to me, I thought, what a great way to get enough user data to prove that people want this thing more than they want privacy. So to me, I looked at that. I'm like, great customer research exercise. They're going to say 98% of our people accepted this 99% of the time. And then they're going to say, okay, that means that our customers want this integration. Then there's going to say, well, you guys told us you wanted this and you can opt out in these other ways. And then they're going to move to an opt-out model. And so to me, I think that yes, it's high friction, but they're also potentially taking steps to be able to move. They can't cross that chasm from where they've been to a completely open and integrated. It wouldn't be absolutely out of step and out of line of what they've done for the last 2 decades. So I think it makes sense.
There's 2 little things they could do. Add an always allow button and put their Apple data sharing prompt at the beginning and go, here's what you're sharing with this app developer. End of story. Let's move on.
And they probably will.
Yeah, by the time the beta's done, they'll add an always allow button.
That's going to be the interface. I'll be extremely surprised if it's not.
I'm not so sure because I think to the point we've been discussing, privacy is pretty baked into Apple's brand and we will see. And maybe just as a quick aside, Elon Musk's somewhat amusing reaction to all of this, which is like Apple integrating with OpenAI is such a privacy threat that he's going to stop his employees from using Apple devices.
Look, that's a great segue, Yaniv, because we wanted to talk about this. For whatever reason on this show, I've been the guy who just kind of is happy to bash on Elon a bit. He has done so many important things for the world, moving the conversation about EV forward, building rockets, untethering the US from Russian dependency for getting to the International Space Station, helping us imagine and dream bigger. I'll call that old Elon. New Elon, red pill Elon, is a classless, inarticulate, tasteless troll.
Tell us what you really think.
No, it's so frustrating to see a hero or to see someone who has so much capacity for change and good to just like perform stunts and stupidity in public. And his laugh has even become like some kind of evil mastermind. It's like, dude, have a holiday. Have a holiday and see a therapist, because please, this stupid stuff, his X exists by the grace of God. Apple App Store allows it to exist. So just hold your tongue, focus on value creation, and stop being a troll, please. It's just such a waste of time.
I'm going to reserve my comments until my arbitration with Elon and all.
These comments do not represent Amir and his thoughts, and are completely separate and different. Elli, what do you reckon? Am I overstating the Elon trollishness?
No, not at all. I couldn't agree more. I think that this transformation that we've seen is absolutely stunning, shocking, terrifying. All of the above. And, I think we've seen it in a number of different tech leaders. And I think, to me, what I take away from it is I look at what are the lessons that can be gleaned from one individual really having such a great amount of control over emerging technologies and industries. So Elon having such intense oversight and control over the EV market, over space exploration, over these really key areas for innovation. And I think we have to take lessons from what can happen from actors who seem like well-intentioned, well-balanced, well-adjusted individuals today. And we don't know how that can develop. And I think what we need to do is look at someone like Sam Altman. Today, he has a lot of power, but there was quite a bit of news about his investments recently, and just how many of his investments are now making partnerships with OpenAI for their AI model development. And I think we have to take what lessons we can from the Elon story and saga. And we have quite a short memory, it seems, collectively. And if we can zoom out, take a look at the last 10 years, 5 years even, and say, okay, well, what can we learn from that? And then how can we actually implement some real safeguards to disperse some of that power? And maybe ultimately it would help someone like that. Maybe Elon wouldn't have gone down this path if some of the power was not quite so concentrated.
I think there's two things here, right? One is, should so much power be concentrated in the hands of any one individual? And Elli, I think you're rightly saying, ideally not. I think that creates existential risk for the world, because any one individual can have a lot of vested interest, can have mental health issues, can have anything go wrong with them, and then we're somewhat beholden to them. I think Elon as an individual is a particularly odd version of that story, because he is simultaneously still doing a lot of good in the world. Like, SpaceX is still an incredible story, right? Like, the businesses he's running, with the exception of X, arguably, are still doing good stuff.
Neuralink, it's terrifying. Neuralink is terrifying, but amazing. It's incredible. Look at what he's done.
Neuralink, Starlink.
Starlink, yeah.
Incredible stuff. And at the same time, he talks like a total fucking moron on his own platform on X. And it's like, how is this the same person? The story arc traditionally is you do good and then, you have your Darth Vader turning to the dark side moment. Elon is simultaneously like a Jedi and a Sith. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on here.
I don't know. Do you think that there's people around him that are doing a lot of the good now? I wonder, he's not an individual who's sitting in the seat anymore, writing code and doing the development. I do wonder, he's got to have people.
Yeah.
He's got people doing stuff around him. It's not just him.
There's a great team around him doing great stuff, and we need to be careful about the cult of individual personality, right? But I'm skeptical about your premise, Yaniv, which is that he's doing such good. I think he's also wielding that power in ways that are actually not healthy. He's skirting FTC laws and trade commission laws, and he knows that the US government is dependent on him for defense, for Starlink, for just his general brand of brilliance and what he represents as a national security threat. I think he says things and does things that I think others don't necessarily get away with. His tweets that move the stock price and stuff. And I think he's playing with that and can continue to play with that in ways that are not healthy. All right, that's our opinion on WWDC, Apple Intelligence, Elon Musk's trollish behavior. What do you think about this? Join us in the comments, have a chat with us. We're going to be in there hanging out and listening to your comments, reacting to you in real time. So join us there and tell us what you think about Apple Intelligence, about their opportunity to be more aggressive with the cloud, and of course, Elon's reaction to the whole thing.